What are you doing? Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David Sneed, and I'm going to tell you a story.
Yay.
Here's JJ. He's going to listen to a story until he falls asleep, and then he won't listen anymore because he'll be asleep. So, I want to talk really briefly about the technical difficulties that I had earlier in the day. This is really bizarre, and I don't exactly know. Rebecca, I'm going to talk about the technical difficulties that I had earlier in the day. Thank you, Kimmy. And basically, so the technical difficulties are that I went to hit live video and it said that I have to update my Chrome browser to the latest beta version. I have no idea how to do that, so if somebody knows how to do that, then let me know. The other option that it gave me was to do it through Firefox. So I downloaded Firefox, and here we are. I'm glad it works, because otherwise we wouldn't have a live stream today. And we are due to finish the Chronicles of Narnia, hopefully before we leave for Ben's graduation. So, what's Daniel's timeline? Why is he in the backyard? He's trying to what? Okay, so we're waiting on Daniel now. Rebecca has no idea, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. So we're waiting on Daniel now. Oh, Granny Bear commented on the video. Oh, that's yesterday's video. Oh, okay. Okay. Hey, Kimmy, why don't you give the synopsis? I'm going to go get Daniel.
Stop.
JJ,
You're not
stop.
supposed to be in the synopsis. I'm sorry, JJ. Okay, so in the last chapter, in the last two chapters, what happened was Diggory and Polly, I remembered again, yay! But Diggory and Polly, well, the lion, he finished his song, and at the end of the song, the animals appeared, and he picked two of each kind of animal to follow him, and he made them talking animals. And this one animal, he said something when everybody else was quiet, and he became the first joke in Narnia. And everybody laughed. And so everyone laughed at him and everything, and he was laughing along with them. And so then Strawberry, he got to talk with his horse caretaker, and Diggory wanted to go talk with Aslan. And after a bit of talking with the horse, Strawberry, he agreed to let Diggory ride him over to Aslan because he was getting further and further away. And so then we went over to the uncle. I forget his name. Uncle Andrew's point of view, and he basically convinced himself that Aslan wasn't singing. He was roaring like a lion when he saw him, and he convinced himself all and then he convinced himself so that he actually heard roaring. And so when he saw the animals starting to speak, they were just animals to him, like regular animals. And when he heard them laughing, he didn't know what to think. And he thought that the children got killed. So, yeah. And also, the witch, when Aslan was singing, she threw the lamppost pole at Aslan, and it bounced off of him. And from the lamppost pole grew a lamppost. a lamppost tree. And that's about it, right?
Sure. I actually wasn't paying attention to the synopsis today, so I'm not really sure what she told you, but I'm sure that it was all true. Um, in regards to Uncle Andrew, not a computer whiz. Yeah, I know you're not a computer whiz, Rebecca. It's okay. In regards to Uncle Andrew not hearing and I always want to stop in the middle of that and just explain, but it is really a true story, because if you convince yourself that and I mean, obviously, the Narnia stories are an allegory. If you convince yourself that the Bible is not true, then there's no way that you can read it and think that it's true, because you've convinced yourself that it's not true. And every time that you read it, you're going to pretend to find fallacies, whether you intentionally do that or not. But, obviously, God's word, this is not God's word. This is just a story. But God's word is true, so which is why we're going to read it every night, because it is definitely worth reading every night. So now we're on John chapter 10, being May the 10th. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. I don't think we have any mothers logged in, but Mom is here. So hey, I would like that light to be on, and I would like you to stop playing with it. Okay, thank you. All right, so John chapter 10. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of the strangers. This figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and my own know me. Sorry, it just says I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. There was again a division among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said, he is a demon and is insane. Why listen to him? Others said, these are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? At that time, the feast of dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me, but you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one." The Jews picked up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of them are you going to stone me?" The Jews answered him, "It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man of God, make yourself God." Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law, 'I said you are gods'? If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, and scripture cannot be broken, do you say of him whom the Father consecrated and sent into the world, 'You are blaspheming because I said I am the Son of God'? If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I am in the Father." Again they sought to arrest him, but he escaped from their hands. He went away again across the Jordan to the place where John had been baptizing at first, and there he remained. And many came to him, and they said, "John did no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true." And many believed in him there. And we will stop there, and tomorrow we will read John chapter 11. So I hope you're enjoying the Bible reading. And now we will, what?
You can't hear it, but there is an iRobot Roomba running all downstairs right now, and it makes me so happy. I love you.
That was creepy. Okay, so. Just joking. Becca says, "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." Has Ben called you yet? Oh my. Ben's gonna be in trouble. Ben's gonna be in trouble. He better call you after the live stream. All right, chapter 11. Diggory and his uncle are both in trouble. By the way, chapter 10, I don't know if we covered this or not. Chapter 10 ended with the animals chasing Uncle Andrew. And there's it's like kind of a stampede kind of thing. So yeah, he doesn't know they can talk. He just thinks that they're like being animals and stuff because he doesn't hear it that way, which is going to be really interesting if Aslan starts to try to talk to him, but we'll see what happens. Chapter 11, Diggory and his uncle are both in trouble. You may think the animals were very stupid not to see at once that Uncle Andrew was the same kind of creature as the two children and the cabby, but you must remember that the animals knew nothing about clothes. They thought that Polly's frock and Diggory's Norfolk suit and the cabby's bowler hat were as much parts of them as their own fur and feathers. They wouldn't have known even if these three were all of the same kind if they hadn't spoken to them, and if Strawberry had not seemed to think so. And Uncle Andrew was a great deal taller than the children, and a good deal thinner than the cabby. He was all in black except for his white waistcoat, not very white by now, and the great gray mop of his hair, now very wild indeed, didn't look to them anything like anything they had seen in the three other humans. So it was only natural that they should be puzzled. Worst of all, he didn't seem to be able to talk. He had tried to, when the bulldog spoke to him, or as he thought, first snarled and then growled at him. He held out his shaking hand and gasped, "Good doggy!" Then, poor old fellow. But the beasts could not understand him any more than he could understand them. They didn't hear any words, only a vague sizzling noise. Perhaps it was just as well they didn't, for no dog that I ever knew, least of all a talking dog of Narnia, likes being called a good doggy then, any more than you would like being called my little man. Then Uncle Andrew dropped down in a dead faint. "There," said the warthog, "it's only a tree. I always thought so." Remember, they had never yet seen a faint or even a fall. The bulldog, who had been sniffing Uncle Andrew all over, raised its head and said, It's an animal, certainly an animal, and probably the same kind as those other ones. By the way, I probably won't have the same voices for each of the animals that I had from yesterday. And we do have a second person on, so I'm sorry if you missed the synopsis, but here we are. Da, 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 da. I don't see that, said one of the bears. An animal wouldn't just roll over like that. We're animals and we don't roll over. We stand up like this. He rose to his hind legs, took a step backward, tripped over a low branch, and fell flat on his back. The third joke, the third joke, the third joke, said the jackdaw in great excitement. I still think it's sort of a tree, said the warthog. If it's a tree, said the other bear, there might be bees' nest in it. I'm sure it's not a tree, said the badger. I had a sort of idea it was trying to speak before it toppled over. That was only the wind in its branches, said the warthog. You surely don't mean, said the jackdaw to the badger, that you think it's a talking animal? It didn't say any words. And yet, you know, said the elephant, the she-elephant, of course. Her husband, as you remember, had been called away by Aslan. And yet, you know, it might be an animal of some kind. Because it's like a trumpet voice. I don't know. I'm just trying to make it up as I go. Mightn't the whitest lump at the end of it be a sort of face? And couldn't those holes be eyes and a mouth? No nose, of course, but then one mustn't be narrow-minded. Very few of us have what could exactly be called a nose. She squinted down the length of her own trunk with pardonable pride. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. The elephant is quite right, said the tapir. I tell you what, said the donkey brightly, perhaps it's an animal that can talk, but thinks it can. That can't talk, but thinks it can. Can it be made to stand up? Said the elephant thoughtfully. She took the limp form of Uncle Andrew gently in her trunk and set him up on one end, upside down, unfortunately, so that 2 half-sovereigns, 3 half-crowns, and a sixpence fell out of his pocket. But it was no use. Uncle Andrew merely collapsed again. There, said several voices, it isn't an animal at all. It's not alive. I tell you it is an animal, said the bulldog. Smell it for yourself. Smelling isn't everything, said the elephant. Why, said the bulldog, if a fellow can't trust his nose, what is he to trust? Well, his brains, perhaps, she replied mildly. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. Well, we must do something about it, said the elephant, because it may be the evil, and it must be shown to Aslan. What do most of us think? Is it an animal, or something of the tree kind? Tree, tree, said a dozen voices. Very well, said the elephant. Then if it's a tree it wants to be planted, we must dig a hole. The 2 moles settled that part of the business very quickly. There was some dispute as to which way up Uncle Andrew ought to be put into the hole, and he had a very narrow escape from being put in head foremost. Several animals said his legs must be his branches, and therefore the grey fluffy thing, they meant his head, must be his root. But then others said that the forked end of him was the muddier and that it spread out more, as roots ought to do. So finally he was planted right way up. When they had patted down the earth, it came up above his knees. It looks dreadfully withered, said the donkey. Of course it wants some watering, said the elephant. I might say, meaning no offense to anyone present, that perhaps for that sort of work, my kind of nose. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog, but the elephant walked quietly to the river, filled her trunk with water, and came back to attend to Uncle Andrew. The sagacious animal went on doing this till gallons of water had been squirted over him, and water was running out the skirts of his frock coat as if he had been for a bath with all his clothes on. In the end, oh, Mom's my second person. In the end, it revived him. He awoke from his faint. What awakening it was, but we must leave him to think over his wicked deed, if he was likely to do anything so sensible, and turn to more important things. Strawberry trotted on with Diggory on his back till the noise of the other animals died away, and now the little group of Aslan and his chosen counselors was quite close. Diggory knew that he couldn't possibly break in on so solemn a meeting, but there was no need to do so. Oh, sorry. At a word from Aslan, the he-elephant, the ravens, and all the rest of them drew aside. Diggory slipped off the horse and found himself face to face with Aslan. And Aslan was bigger and more beautiful and more brightly golden and more terrible than he had thought. He dared not look into the great eyes. "Please, Mr. Lion, Aslan, sir," said Diggory, may I, please, will you give me some magic fruit of this country to make my mother well?" He had been desperately hoping that the lion would say yes, but had been horribly afraid it might say no, but he was taken aback when it did neither. "This is the boy," said Aslan, looking not at Diggory but at his counselors. "This is the boy who did it." "Oh dear," thought Diggory, "what have I done now?" "Son of Adam," said the lion, "there is an evil witch abroad in my new land of Narnia. Tell these good beasts how she came here." A dozen different things that he might say flashed through Diggory's mind, but he had the sense to say nothing except the exact truth. "I brought her here, Aslan," he answered in a low voice. "For what purpose?" "I wanted to get her out of my own world, back into her own. I thought I was taking her back to her own place." "How did she come to be in your world, son of Adam?" By magic." The lion said nothing, and Diggory knew that he had not told enough. It was my uncle, Aslan," he said. "He sent us out of our own world by magic rings. At least I had to go because he sent Polly first, and then we met the witch in that place called Carn, and she held on to us when—" "You met the witch?" said Aslan in a low voice which had the threat of a growl in it. "She woke up," said Diggory wretchedly, and then, turning very white, I mean, I woke her, because I wanted to know what would happen if I struck the bell. Polly didn't want to. It wasn't her fault. I fought her. I know I shouldn't have. I think it was a bit of an enchanted by the writing under the bell." "Do you?" asked Aslan, still speaking very low and deep. "No," said Diggory. "I see now I wasn't. I was only pretending." There was a long pause, and Diggory was thinking all the time, "I've spoiled everything. There's no chance of getting anything from Mother now." When the lion spoke again, it was not to Diggory. "You see, friends," he said, "that before the new clean world I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it, waked and brought hither by this son of Adam." The beasts, even Strawberry, all turned their eyes on Diggory, till he felt that he wished the ground would swallow him up. "But do not be cast down," said Aslan, still speaking to the beasts. "Evil will come of that evil, but it is still a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. In the meantime, let us take such order that for many 100 years yet this shall be a merry land in a merry world. And as Adam's race has done the harm, Adam's race shall help to heal it. Draw near, you other two. The last words were spoken to Polly and the cabby, who had now arrived. Polly, all eyes and mouth, was staring at Aslan and holding the cabby's hand rather tightly. The cabby gave one glance at the lion and took off his bowler hat. No one had yet seen him without it. When it was off, he looked younger and nicer and more like a countryman and less like a London cabman. "Son," said Aslan to the cabby, "I have known you long. Do you know me?" "Well, no, sir," said the cabby, "leastways not in an ordinary manner of speaking. Yet I feel somehow, if I may make so free as how we've met before." "It is well," said the lion. "You know better than you think you know, and you shall live to know me better yet. How does this land please you?" "It's a fair treat, sir," said the cabby. "Would you like to live here always?" "Well, you see, sir, I'm a married man," said the cabby. "If my wife was here, neither of us would ever want to go back to London, I reckon. We're both country folks, really." Aslan threw up his shaggy head, opened his mouth, and uttered a long, single note, not very loud, but full of power. Polly's heart jumped in her body when she heard it. She felt sure that it was a call, and that anyone who heard that call would want to obey it, and what's more, would be able to obey it, however many worlds and ages lay between. And so, though she was filled with wonder, she was not really astonished or shocked when all of a sudden a young woman with a kind, honest face stepped out of nowhere and stood beside her. Polly knew at once that it was the cabby's wife, fetched out of our world, not by any tiresome magic rings, but quickly, simply, and sweetly, as a bird flies to its nest. The young woman had apparently been in the middle of a washing day, for she wore an apron, her sleeves were rolled up to the elbow, and there were soap suds on her hands. If she had time to put on her good clothes, her best hat had imitation cherries on it, she would have looked dreadful. As it was, she looked rather nice. Here's a picture of the cabby and his wife. Of course she thought she was dreaming. That was why she didn't rush across to her husband and ask him what on earth had happened to them both. But when she looked at the lion, she didn't feel quite so sure it was a dream. Yet for some reason she did not appear to be very frightened. Then she dropped a little half curtsy, as some country girls still knew how to do in those days. After that she went and put her hand in the cabby's and stood there looking round her a little shyly. Maybe this is where I should show you the picture. "My children," said Aslan, fixing his eyes on both of them, "you are to be the first king and queen of Narnia." The cabby opened his mouth in astonishment, and his wife turned very red. "You shall rule and name all these creatures, and do justice among them, and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise. And enemies will arise, for there is an evil witch in this world." The cabby swallowed hard 2 or 3 times and cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, "and thanking you very much, I'm sure, which my mistress does the same, but I ain't no sort of chap for a job like that. I never had much education, you see." "Well," said Aslan, "can you use a spade and a plough and raise food out of the earth?" "Yes, sir, I could do a bit of that sort of work, being brought up to it like." "Can you rule these creatures kindly and fairly? remembering that they are not slaves like the dumb beasts of the world that you were born in, but talking beasts and free subjects. I see that, sir, replied the cabby. I'd try to do the square thing by them all. And would you bring up your children and grandchildren to do the same? It'd be up to me to try, sir. I'd do my best, wouldn't we, Nellie? And you wouldn't have favorites either among your own children or among the other creatures, or let any hold another under or use it hardly. I never could abide by such goings-on, sir, and that's the truth. I'd give 'em what for if I caught 'em at it, said the cabby. All through this conversation his voice was growing slower and richer, more like the country voice he must have had as a boy, and less like the sharp, quick voice of the Cockney. And if enemies came against the land, for enemies will arise, and there was war, would you be the first in the charge and the last in the retreat? Well, sir, said the cabby very slowly, a chap don't exactly know till he's been tried. I dare say I might turn out never such a soft 'un. Never did no fighting except with my fists. I try, that is, I hope I'd try to do my bit. Then, said Aslan, you will have done all that a king should do. Your coronation will be held presently, and you and your children and grandchildren shall be blessed, and some will be kings of Narnia. I'm having the same glitch that I had yesterday. And others will be kings of Archenland, which lies yonder over the southern mountains, and you, little daughter, here he turned to Polly, are welcome. Have you forgiven the boy for the violence he did you in the hall of images, in the desolate palace of accursed Charn? Yes, Aslan, we've made it up, said Polly. That is well, said Aslan. And now for the boy himself. Chapter 12 is called Strawberry's Adventure. Rebecca, I am going to keep reading, but if you could just please let me know in the comments, make sure that I'm still coming through, because it's glitching just like it was yesterday. It says, sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. So I don't know what that's all about, but there it is. All right. Chapter 12, Strawberry's Adventure. Diggory kept his mouth very tight shut. He had been growing more and more uncomfortable. He hoped that, whatever happened, he wouldn't blub or do anything ridiculous. You need to be in bed, little boy. Son of Adam, said Aslan, are you ready to undo the wrong that you have done to my sweet country of Narnia on the very day of its birth? Coming through perfectly. I'm not sure why it tells you that. Perfect. I'm glad to hear that. Well, I don't see what I can do, said Diggory. You see, the queen ran away, and I asked, are you ready? Said the lion. Yes, said Diggory. He had, for a second, some wild idea of saying, I'll try to help you if you'll promise to help my mother, but he realized in time that the lion was not at all the same sort of person one could try to make bargains with. But when he had said yes, he thought of his mother, and he thought of the great hopes he had, and how they were all dying away, and a lump came in his throat, and tears in his eyes, and he blurted out, but please, can't you give me something that will cure mother? Up till then he had been looking at the lion's great feet and the huge claws on them. Now, in his despair, he looked up at its face. What he saw surprised him as much as anything in his whole life, for the tawny face that was bent down near his own, and wonder of wonders, great shining tears stood in the lion's eyes. They were such big, bright tears compared with Diggory's own that for a moment he felt as if the lion must really be sorrier about his mother than he was himself. My son, said Aslan, I know. Grief is great. Only you and I in this land know that yet. Let us be good to one another. But I have to think of hundreds of years in the life of Narnia. The witch whom you have brought into this world will come back to Narnia again, but it need not be yet. It is my wish to plant in Narnia a tree that she will not dare to approach. And that tree will protect Narnia from her for many years. So this land shall have a long, bright morning before any clouds come over the sun. You must get me the seed from which that tree is to grow. Yes, sir, said Diggory. He didn't know how it was to be done, but he felt quite sure now that he would be able to do it. The lion drew a deep breath, stooped its head even lower, and gave him a lion's kiss. And at once Diggory felt that new strength and courage had gone into him. Dear son, said Aslan, I will tell you what you must do. Turn and look to the west and tell me what you see. I see terribly big mountains, Aslan, said Diggory. I see this river coming down cliffs and a waterfall, and beyond the cliff there are high green hills with forests, and beyond those there are higher ranges that look almost black, and then far away there are big snowy mountains all heaped up together like pictures of the Alps, and behind those there's nothing but the sky. You see well, said the lion. Now, in the land of Narnia ends where the waterfall comes down, and once you have reached the top of the hill of the cliffs, you will be out of Narnia and into the western wild. You must journey through those mountains till you find a green valley with a blue lake in it, walled round by mountains of ice. At the end of the lake there is a steep green hill. On the top of that hill there is a garden. In the center of that garden is a tree. Pluck an apple from that tree and bring it back to me. Yes, sir, said Diggory again. He hadn't the least idea of how he was to climb the cliff and find his way among all the mountains, but he didn't like to say that for fear it would sound like making excuses. But he did say, I hope, Aslan, you're not in a hurry. I shan't be able to get there and back very quickly. Little son of Adam, you shall have help, said Aslan. He then turned to the horse who had been standing quietly beside them all this time, swishing his tail to keep the flies off, and listening with his head on one side as if the conversation were a little difficult to understand. My dear, said Aslan to the horse, would you like to become a winged horse? You should have seen how the horse shook its mane and how its nostrils widened, and the little tap it gave the ground with one back hoof. Clearly it would very much like to be a winged horse, but it only said, if you wish, Aslan, if you really mean, I don't know why it should be me. I'm not a very clever horse. Be winged. Be the father of all flying horses, roared Aslan in a voice that shook the ground. Your name is Fledge. The horse shied, just as it might have shied in the old miserable days when it pulled the hansom. Then it roared, it strained its neck back as if there were a fly biting its shoulders, and it wanted to scratch them. And then, just as the beast had burst out of the earth, There burst out from the shoulders of Fledge wings that spread and grew, larger than eagles, larger than swans, larger than angels' wings in church windows. The feathers shone chestnut color and copper color. He gave a great sweep with them and leapt into the air 20 feet above Aslan and Diggory. He snorted, neighed, and curveted. Then, after circling once round them, he dropped to the earth, all four hoofs together, looking awkward and surprised, but extremely pleased. Got a picture. I hope you can see it. I can't tell if it's in line or not. Usually I'm a little bit out of line, so. Is it good, Fledge? It's very good, Aslan, said Fledge. Will you carry this little son of Adam on your back to the mountain valley I spoke of? What, now? At once? Said Strawberry, or Fledge, as we must now call him. Hurrah! Come on, little one. I've had things like you on my back before, long, long ago, when there were green fields and sugar. What are the two daughters of Eve whispering about? Said Aslan, turning very suddenly on Polly and the cabbie's wife, who had in fact been making friends. If you please, sir, said Queen Helen, for that is what Nelly, the cabman's wife, now was, I think the little girl would love to go too, if it weren't no trouble. What does Fledge say about that? Asked the lion. Oh, I don't mind too. Not when they're little ones, said Fledge, but I hope the elephant doesn't want to come as well. The elephant had no such wish. And the new king of Narnia helped both the children up, that is, he gave Diggory a rough heave and set Polly as gently and daintily on the horse's back as if she were made of china and might break. There they are, Strawberry, Fledge, I should say. This is a good rum go. Do not fly too high, said Aslan. Do not try to go over the tops of the great ice mountains. Look out for the valleys, the green places, and fly through them. There will always be a way through. And now be gone with my blessing. Oh, Fledge, said Diggory, leaning forward, pat the horse's glossy neck. This is fun. Hold on to me tight, Polly. Next moment the country dropped away beneath them and whirled round as Fledge, like a huge pigeon, circled once or twice before setting off on his long westward flight. Looking down, Polly could hardly see the king and the queen, and even Aslan himself was only a bright yellow spot on the green grass. Soon the wind was in their faces, and Fledge's wings settled down to a steady beat. All Narnia, many-colored with lawns and rocks and heather and different sorts of trees, lay spread out below them, the river winding through it like a ribbon of quicksilver. They could already see over the tops of the low hills which lay northward on their right. Beyond those hills a great moorland sloped gently up and up to the horizon. On their left the mountains were much higher, but every now and then there was a gap when you could see between steep pine woods a glimpse of the southern lands that lay beyond them, looking blue and far away. That'll be where Archenland is, said Polly. Yes, but look ahead, said Diggory, for now a great barrier of cliffs rose before them, and they were almost dazzled by the sunlight, dancing on the great waterfall by which the river roars and sparkles down into Narnia itself from the high western lands in which it rises. They were flying so high already that the thunder of those falls could only just be heard as a small, thin sound, but they were not yet high enough to fly over the tops of the cliffs. We'll have to do that a bit of zigzagging here, said Fledge. Hold on tight. He began flying to and fro, getting higher at each turn. The air grew colder, and they heard the call of eagles far below them. I say, look back, look behind, said Polly. There they could see the whole valley of Narnia stretched out to where, just before the eastern horizon, There was a gleam of the sea, and now they were so high that they could see tiny-looking jagged mountains appearing beyond the northwest moors and plains of what looked like sand far in the south. "I wish we had someone to tell us what all those places are," said Diggory. "I don't suppose they're anywhere yet," said Polly. "I mean, there's no one there and nothing happening. The world only began today." "No, but people will get there," said Diggory, "and then they'll have histories, you know." "Well, it's a jolly good thing they have it now," said Polly, "because nobody can be made to learn it. Battles and dates and all that rot." Now they were over the top of the cliffs, and in a few minutes the valley land of Narnia had sunk out of sight behind them. They were flying over a wild country of steep hills and dark forests, still following the course of the river. I'm going to show you the picture of Fledge and the two children on his back. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. The really big mountains loomed ahead, but the sun was now the travelers' eyes, and they couldn't see things very clearly in that direction, for the sun sank lower and lower till the western sky was all like one great furnace, full of melted gold, and it set at the last behind a jagged peak which stood up against the brightness as sharp and flat as if it were cut out of cardboard. "It's none too warm up here," said Polly. "And my wings are beginning to ache," said Fledge. "There's no sign of that valley with a lake in it, like what Aslan said. What about coming down and looking out for a decent spot to spend the night in? We shan't reach that place tonight." "Yes, and sure it's about time for supper," said Diggory. So Fledge came lower and lower, and they came down nearer to the earth and among the hills, and the air grew warmer, and after travelling so many hours with nothing to listen to but the beat of Fledge's wings, it was nice to hear the homely and earthy noises again, the clatter of the river on its stony bed, and the creaking of trees in the light wind. A warm, good smell of sun-baked earth and grass and flowers came up to them. At last Fledge alighted. Diggory rolled off and helped Polly to dismount. Both were glad to stretch their stiff legs. The valley in which they had come down was in the heart of the mountains, snowy heights, one of them, looking rose-red in the reflections of sunset, towered above them. "I am hungry," said Diggory. "Well, tuck in," said Fledge, taking a big mouthful of grass. Then he raised his head, still chewing and with bits of grass sticking out on each side of his mouth like whiskers, and said, "Come on, you two, don't be shy. There's plenty for all of us." "But we can't eat grass," said Diggory. Said Fledge, speaking with his mouth full. "Well, don't know quite what you'll do then. Very good grass, too." Polly and Diggory stared at one another in dismay. "Well, I do think someone might have arranged about our meals," said Diggory. "I'm sure Aslan would have, if you'd asked him," said Fledge. "Wouldn't he know without being asked?" said Polly. "I've no doubt he would," said the horse, still with his mouth full, "but I've a sort of idea he likes to be asked." "But what on earth are we to do?" asked Diggory. "I'm sure I don't know," said Fledge. "Unless you try the grass, you might like it better than you think." "Oh, don't be silly," said Polly, stamping her foot. "Of course humans can't eat grass any more than you could eat mutton chop." "For goodness sake, don't talk about chops and things," said Diggory. "It only makes it worse." Diggory said that Polly had better take herself home by Ring and get something to eat there. He couldn't himself, because he had promised to go straight on his message for Aslan, and if once he showed up again at home, anything might happen to prevent his getting back. But Polly said she wouldn't leave him, and Diggory said it was jolly decent of her. "I say," said Polly, "I've still got the remains of that bag of toffee in my jacket. It'll be better than nothing." "A lot better," said Diggory, "but be careful to get your hand into your pocket without touching your ring." This was difficult and a delicate job, but they managed it in the end. The little paper bag was very squashy and sticky when they finally got it out, so that it was more a question of tearing the bag off the toffees than of getting the toffees out of the bag. Some grown-ups, you know how fussy they can be about this sort of thing, would rather have gone without supper altogether than eaten those toffees. There were 9 of them all told. It was Diggory who had the bright idea of eating 4 each and planting the 9th, for, as he said, if the bar off the lamp post turned into a little light tree, why shouldn't this turn into a toffee tree? So they dibbled a small hole in the turf and buried the piece of toffee. Then they ate the other pieces, making them last as long as they could. It was a poor meal, even with all the paper they couldn't help eating as well. When Fledge had quite finished his own excellent supper, he lay down. The children came and sat one on each side of him, leaning against his warm body, and when he had spread a wing over each, they were really quite snug. I'm going to show you the picture here. I hope you can see it. Da, 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 da. As the bright young stars of that new world came out, they talked over everything: how Diggory had hoped to get something for his mother, and how, instead of that, he had been sent on this message. And they repeated to one another all the signs by which they would know the places they were looking for, the blue lake and the hill with the garden on top of it. The talk was just beginning to slow down as they got sleepy, and when suddenly Polly sat up wide awake and said, "Hush!" Everyone listened as hard as they could. Perhaps it was only the wind in the trees, and Diggory. Perhaps it was only the wind in the trees, said Diggory presently. I'm not sure, said Fledge. Anyway, wait. There it goes again. By Aslan, it is something. The horse scrambled to its feet with a great noise and a great upheaval. The children were already on theirs. Fledge trotted to and fro, sniffing and whinnying. The children tiptoed this way and that, looking behind every bush and tree. They kept on thinking they saw things, and there was one time when Polly was perfectly certain she had seen a tall, dark figure gliding quickly away in a westerly direction. But they caught nothing, and in the end Fledge lay down again, and the children re-snuggled, if that's the right word, under his wings. Then they went to sleep at once. Fledge stayed awake much longer, moving his ears to and fro in the darkness, and sometimes giving a little shiver with his skin as if a fly had lighted on him. But in the end, he, too, slept. And that is a great place to end today. The next chapter is called An Unexpected Meeting. And we are, what is that, 30, less than 30 pages away from the end. So I think that we can easily finish that tomorrow. And if I read this next chapter, the last 2 are so short that it's going to seem like it's, oh wait, no, it's okay, 40 pages from the end. I think if I read this next chapter, the next 2 are going to seem just too short to seem right. So we're going to just stop there. And I hope you're enjoying the story. I'm sure JJ's asleep. I'm sure Kimmy's awake. Oh, JJ's awake. That's a miracle. Maybe we should read the next chapter. Okay, all right, fine. Okay, I'm on the fence. Okay, so I want to talk to you about something else that is that we're concerned about. So behind me, you see there is nothing. So what we want to do is put up a picture here and a picture here
And a picture here.
and some different things. So JJ, go on back to your room. Okay, so what I would like to happen is if we could maybe get, another chapter. Oh, okay, I don't know what you want, Rebecca. So if you want me to read another chapter, it is 10 minutes to 10, but we do have wide awake children, one of which has vowed to finish her 850-page book tonight. So I don't, 849-page book tonight. Sorry, Daniel, what? Yeah, it's insane because she had a lot to go on. Okay, so I can read this book, this chapter, but I'm telling you tomorrow is going to seem really short because the last two chapters are kind of short. Daniel says he wants to save it for tomorrow. JJ says one more. Kimmy says, what does Kimmy say? Kimmy says she's up for it. Rebecca is, I'm really confused what Rebecca's saying. She said,
I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but it's kicking
those are
a
really
fireball upside down, doing a backflip.
interesting pictures, Kimmy.
DJ.
Okay.
Rebecca said another
She said save it for tomorrow. Okay. And we're going to save it for tomorrow. Okay. So that means everybody else needs to go on to bed. Okay. I know we've been kind of on the fence for 5 minutes now. So, JJ, I'll check you in a minute. Okay. He's not used to being awake after the live stream, so he doesn't know what to do. So anyway, we will talk to you later, and I hope you have a good night, and God bless you. We love you, Becca. We can't wait to see you next week. Love you. Bye.